What you're about to watch is a recorded session from a webinar on the State of Sales 2025, hosted by FlowState. It was a really fascinating conversation where we spoke about AI. We also spoke about the role of outreach in 2025 and what it means to be a seller and also a buyer in today's B2B landscape. We were joined by fantastic guests: Matt Dixon, the co-author of The Challenger Sale and the Activator Advantage; Jen Allen Knuth, the founder of Demand Gen; David A. Brock, the author of the Sales Manager Survival Guide; and Dr. Howard Dover, the author of the Sales Innovation Paradox. There is a ton of practical learning in this webinar and some really, really interesting topics talked about. Feel free to like and subscribe. See you soon.
There he is, just right on time.
Right on time, Dr. Dover.
1 minute past I made it, but he's in education, I'll forgive him.
Are we supposed to call, if the professors, Dr. Dover?
I call them Dr. Dover. If the professor's, 10 minutes late, Howard, we can all leave. Is that the...
Oh, yeah, exactly, including the attendees, apparently.
Yeah, that's funny because in undergrad, we all said that, and 45 minutes later, my professor came in and gave key aspects that were going to be on the exam, and I was one of the few in the room.
Teacher's pet.
You redeemed yourself. All right, intros. I'm Jen Allen Knuth. I'm the founder of a company called Demand Gen. I spent my entire career as a frontline seller. I was never a manager or leader. I learned so much from Matt Dixon. Matt and I actually worked together for probably over a decade at CEB and at Challenger. And then I went on to spend some time at Lavender, which is a tech startup for cold email. And now I am a sales trainer. Sexy, sexy, sexy. So great to be here.
Don't knock it. Over to you, Matt.
So all the smart things Jen says, I taught her, and all the bad things.
He's not wrong. He's
Dover,
not wrong.
Brock, or Aaron taught her.
It was Jen learned it in spite of Matt.
It's true. Yeah. It's like bizarro guidance, like to just do the opposite of whatever this guy said. So I don't actually, unlike Jen, I've never sold anything in my life. I've never been a salesperson. I've never led sales teams. I just write about sales, which puts me in a kind of the maybe unenviable position of being kind of an outside observer to this whole profession of ours that we're going to talk a lot about today. But I spent a long time at CEB with Jen. I got to know Aaron and Dave and Dr. Dover over the years. So it's great to be with all of you again. I'm the co-founder of a company called DCM Insights. We do research-backed training and advisory for sales organizations, but where we really focus is actually on the professional services segment. So we're teaching non-sellers how to sell. So think doer sellers like partners in law firms, consulting firms, investment banks, accounting firms, etc. People whose job it is to not only execute the work, but to bring in the work and build a book of business for themselves and their firms. So great to be here.
Good stuff. You didn't mention your new book, mate. So,
new book, yes, the Activator Advantage, which is on the professional services research. That is just came out a few weeks ago, May 20th.
Yeah, really look forward to my signed copy as well. I really appreciate that. Over to you, Dave.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's in the mail. It'll arrive around the same time as my check for this event.
Over to you, Dave.
I'm Dave Brock, author of Sales Manager Survival Guide. I run a boutique consulting company called Partners in Excellence. We primarily focus on very, very large organizations. Everything from business strategy to their customer-focused strategies, go-to-market strategies, and those kinds of things. And my sole contribution to this is dad jokes, and I measure them not by the quality of the laugh, but by the groans.
Let's start with that one. Okay, over to you, Dr. Dover.
So I want to know where Matt is, because here in Texas, it's so hot you would not wear a two-layer. So
I am we've got a place in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. It's about 2.5 hours east of DC, where it is also a billion degrees out, but my air conditioning is on like hypersonic today.
Cool. All right. Because I was on the West Coast, and then I just came into Texas, and I went, oh, gee. So
yeah.
Howard Dover, I am the founder and director of the Center for Professional Sales at the University of Texas at Dallas. I like to call myself, from an academic perspective, a sales technologist. And strangely enough, in the moment we're in, sales economist is a really important concept because my training and background is in economics, not psychology. So that's actually useful in the current uncertainty environment that we're operating in. So
amazing. Well, look, I'm really excited to have you all here, and I think we all know the expertise that you're going to bring to this conversation, every single last one of you. And I just want to say thank you all for joining, and thank you for our panelists who are doing this of the sort of goodness of their own heart and they're not getting paid. But we're tackling a really, really important subject, which is the state of sales. Now, look, I just want to kind of start by getting the elephant in the room, really clearly out there nice and early. And hopefully we won't spend all the chat talking about it. But I want you guys to cast your mind back to maybe 2023, way before every single person in the world was using ChatGPT to basically run every aspect of their life. And when you think about what sellers were like back then, fast forward to 2025, it's fair to say when it comes to finding insight, when it comes to doing research, there's almost like a level playing field now when it comes to the profession of selling. I don't want to look at this through the perspective of, oh, I get my Clay to talk to my HubSpot now, which then does this from an operational point of view. I want to talk about it from the human point of view. How has AI affected the human side of selling in 2025? What's changed? What's different? What's improved? What's made it worse? Over to you all. Who wants to start? No one. Okay, Dr. Dover, over to you.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you picked Dr. Dover.
So I'm going to go with, I wrote a book called The Sales Innovation Paradox. And what's amazing is how timely it still is, because as we see AI deployed, first thing, AI deployment is occurring at the ground level, but not at the strategic level in sales, from my perspective. I've been in 4 conferences over the last 6 weeks. The one consistent theme is that AI is important, but nobody's really got strategic implementation. But lots of salespeople are using it. And what I'm seeing though is we're using it for the efficiency versus the effectiveness play. And what we're not realizing is that we were already beating the customer so badly before that the behavior shift that occurred because of the poor use of technology before is just exacerbated with AI. So for the most part, I would say we're actually worse off than we were. And I should update the book and call it 2.0 and just say AI is creating a bigger problem. Now, on the flip side, I think the people who are realizing the opportunity, and Dave and I have been working on something for 2 years on this. When we are using precision and when we are relevant, then we break through all the noise. And I think that's rare, but it's not easy to do, but it is doable. And I think the people who are doing it are having phenomenal success.
Interesting.
So let me jump in here. So I'm kind of toying with this post. The title is tentatively, "We've mastered the first half of AI, the artificial piece. Now let's move on to the intelligence." and that's, as I look at it, and when you look at kind of technology changes, we're following the same path. Is we always find the most inane, stupid applications of it. And then as we start getting smarter, we start using it much more effectively. And, there's a lot, my feeds are filled with all this stuff about AI doing the work for you. And it's all this efficiency thing. But what we aren't quite crossing to yet is, how does it help us think differently? How does it help our customers think differently? And how do we leverage AI to really start helping us engage customers in the most impactful conversations that we have? And we're starting to see some tools to do this. I mean, I'm using these tools every single day with my customers, and that kind of thing. And kind of the way, rather than using AI to get answers, we're using AI to help us think differently.
What does that look like, Dave? Sorry to cut you off, Matt, but what does that actually look like? So it sounds great, but what does it look like?
So here, I really nerd out. I develop all these GPTs. In fact, I have this. I'm an old-fashioned guy. I remember the days when we used to do call planning and call prep and meeting planning and meeting prep.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, gee, I have this hour meeting today with these really smart people. Matt Dixon, Howard Dover, Jen, Aaron, how am I going to be prepared? What am I going to do this? So I have this little GPT called my kitchen table advisory board, and it's something I use for brainstorming. I used it the other day. I'm doing an innovation project. So I sat down with Clay Christensen, Jim Collins, and Cialdini to talk about how we help customers innovate. And so we did a brainstorming session. So I did a brainstorming session this morning on a conversation with you. I said, what's the future of sales? What's going wrong? How do we do it? And, it was kind of a brainstorming session. I got to say, I call it my kitchen table advisory board. Kitchen table Howard is much more interesting than real Howard, but I went through and started thinking about it, and it really gave me ideas about this conversation of things that were missing. And so, that just is helping me think about how I contribute to this meeting much better. And I'm using similar kinds of tools with my clients to say, how do we think about things? I was last week, I was in Europe for an innovation session, and we were using these tools. I use these tools to help me plan the session. Then I provided a variant of the same tool to the clients and said, as you go out, here's how you should start thinking about these tools and the people you should be talking to.
Interesting.
And so when we get back together in 2 weeks, I want you to come back and do this with me. And so we're using these tools, embedding them in our process. I have a meeting tool. Every meeting, as consultants, what we do is we say, here's what we accomplished in the meeting. Here's what we agreed on. Here's the follow-up and the next steps. We're meeting in 2 weeks. Now what I do is I have this meeting GPT. I upload the transcripts. I put a few little things, ideas and things that people should do. I send it to them. And now they're, rather than, classically what they do is the day before the meeting, they open up the email and do the work. Now they're involved in thinking about it and really engaged. So I keep that interactivity after the meeting. So we're using these tools in very different ways. People love it because they feel sexy and cool using AI in a very different way. But again, we're not using it for answers. We're using it to help us think.
Really good insight. Matt, I think you were going to jump in with something as well.
Yeah, I just want to go before Jen does because she'll have the wittiest comment. I don't want to go after her. So I was thinking about this from a few different perspectives. I think first, again, back to since I'm not a salesperson, it's hard for me to speak to, how AI is helping me do my job. Certainly have lots of conversations with sales leaders and salespeople about it. But I can say from a research perspective, it's helpful and not helpful. So I think it's helpful from a synthesis and like what we call secondary research. So what's already been written. It's actually not very helpful for innovation or frame breaking ideas because by definition, it's built on existing content and ideas. So it's not going to help you come up with anything new or innovative from that perspective. But it does expedite a lot of the drudgery of like, okay, we're going to go study key account management. What's the state of understanding of that function in a sales organization? What are best companies doing, things like that. And it draws from a large body of research. I think the second thing I say about AI is from I'm interested in AI from kind of a business perspective, meaning, and I always ask the question, like, who's making money on this stuff? And I know NVIDIA is making money, and I know that the consulting firms are making money advising companies on how they should be using AI. But it's not clear to me that there's a lot of other organizations making money on this technology right now. And so I talk to a lot of SaaS leaders, for instance, who are coming in and layering in AI capabilities because they have to, because it's keeping up with the Joneses, because all their competitors are. But very few of them are actually getting their customers to pay for it and to buy it and to pay a premium for it and things like that. It just feels like it's this arms race, which then makes the delivery of their product much more expensive than it was before, eats into margins, so on and so forth. Then the last thing I would say, just from a sales perspective, I think, one of the things that, and this is just to reflect a little bit on the latest book, I think there's been, it's interesting, this story of activators and what they're doing. For those who haven't read that book or are familiar with that research, we're looking at people who basically sell themselves. So this is, these are not product sellers. These are not people selling productized solutions. They're selling their personal expertise and the expertise of their colleagues. So I think advisory industries like law, accounting, consulting, et cetera. And I think there's this really interesting question about the state of the customer relationship. Like if you want to study what the very best salespeople, or in this case, professionals are doing to cultivate deep client relationships, you would go to the batting cages of relationship development. And that is where you have nothing else to sell but yourself. And so I think it's a fascinating perspective. It gives us a fascinating perspective there. And if we think about what Activators, the kind of winning profile we write about in the book, what they're doing differently is, if you think about this is true of partners, it's also true of salespeople, their mindset is value and relationship cultivation and depth and building happen after you sign an agreement with me. So if you buy something from us, I will deliver value. I will build a deep relationship with you. It's going to be great. But first, sign on the line that is dotted. Activators, and this is true again for most partners in a lot of professional services firms, activators are wired very differently. What they're trying to do is deliver value and build a deep relationship. And then paid work is only the natural evolution of that relationship. So now if you think about that, and I think it's a really interesting question to ask, like, is that relevant to, a tech salesperson, a med device salesperson? And I'd argue it probably should be, right? We should be thinking about how do we deliver value, insight, and build relationships with people before we ask them for money and ask them to buy stuff from us. But if you look at what AI is doing, I actually think it's getting us farther away from that. There's a lot more spam cannoning up front, a lot more impersonal, like generic outreach. This was always a problem, and I think it's just become AI has exacerbated it in many respects.
Yeah,
a great example is that prospecting note that you got yesterday.
Yeah,
Jack.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
We'll talk about. You just mentioned something really interesting there, which is the very process of selling to someone should be so valuable that way before they use your product or service, they've already had deep value from the process, even whether that's deciding to buy or not buy, or the advice or the way that you help them navigate that process as well. But it's interesting you say that AI is pushing us further away from that, and it's actually not enabling that relationship to happen. So that's a really interesting point. Jen, is there anything that you wanted to add so far?
Yeah, Bob Britton called this out in the Q&A, and I totally agree. I think what Matt just talked about is our tendency in sales to always look for the easy button. So there's this narrative that we want to eliminate low value work, and then we put prospecting in that bucket and outbound in that bucket. Like that is our first entry point. That is our movie trailer to the customer. And we've just, because it's hard, said it's a low value thing. Let's kick it over to an AI SDR, which is why Matt got that wild email referencing his own webinar he's going to be on. So a lot of the work that I'm doing, I'm working with clients who are saying, hey, we're really struggling to build outbound pipeline. And when you start looking at the emails that are going out, it's extremely evident. It's the M dashes, the 12th grade academia language. It's like, of course you're struggling. You're writing like a professor to someone who has 5 seconds in between meetings to skim and get to the damn point. That said, I was like a total skeptic in the beginning. I've completely come around to it as a research assistant. So if I have 3 minutes before a call, that used to mean there's no way I could do adequate prep. Now, if I prompt it with who's the CEO of this company and what are their most recent interviews about the company's growth strategy, or what would be hard about being the CFO at 3M right now, I can get back really digestible, great, insightful things that allow me to do the type of things that Matt is talking about. Enter into a conversation talking about their business instead of showing up and throwing about mine. I just think the problem is the problem that has always been persistent, that Howard talked about in his book, which is we just love to smash the easy button instead of doing the hard work. And then we pay those consequences later. AI is no different.
Yeah, it's interesting for me because I think particularly over the last 10 years or so, we've over-indexed efficiency versus effectiveness so much now, particularly with outbound, where businesses are actually quite happy just to play a volume game whilst basically scorching the territory and scorching the earth and actually damaging their brand in the process. But worse still, and for me this is the bigger part, and we'll move on to this in a second, but it's actually cheapened the brand of salespeople even more than it's ever done before. Actually, sellers used to start from a position of -1. They're actually starting from a position of about -10 now. So this leads us on to kind of the next obvious question, which is, it's impossible not to talk about selling without talking about buying. Now, there's obviously all this wonderful stuff that buyers can now do to do a load of research on their own through AI. But how has AI affected the relationship between the buyer and the seller? What's happened now? Because, I mean, famously, we used to say that the buyer has more information, but it doesn't mean that they're more informed. But we now may be in a position now where the buyer has more information and they've got an ability to be more informed far quicker. And that's going to naturally affect the relationship between the buyer and the seller.
So let me lead off with a couple
sorry,
of,
go ahead.
let me lead off with a couple of data points, and then I'll be quiet and hear everybody else's reaction to it. Because, so first data point is coming that outbound is now costing about 60% more per dollar than it did maybe about a year ago. I have a couple data points if you want to get the exact reason why we came up with that, but I have two sources that I trust that are pretty interesting on that. Second one is the Gartner, former CEB, right? Data point on rep free has dropped sub 70. So we're actually in the mid 60s. So, and it used to be a high point was 80. So actually, buyers are finding value in the interaction of salespeople at a higher rate with AI. Whoa. So I'm going to leave that and throw that around. So buyers are finding value. It's still bad. I mean, 2/3 are saying I'd prefer not to talk to somebody, but the fact that we're going in the right direction is interesting to me.
Is that sorry? It's easy to. Well, actually, I'll let you guys answer. The part of me is like, is that cause or effect though, right? So is that because they're so bogged down with AI, asking AI, that actually speaking to a human might be easier than it was?
Well, it could have also been that we laid off so many bad salespeople over the last year and a half that the people who are really doing bad stuff are gone. So it could be that too.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've always been a little skeptical of that one because I'd prefer to drive a Ferrari too, but I don't. So I'm like, I don't, in a world where it's like you don't actually have a lot of choice when buying B2B solutions. I don't know that we have many examples of, complex solutions being purchased in a rep-free kind of way. To me, it's the same thing that kind of bugs me, just like intellectually, about saying like, buying is so hard. Like, I get it, but if that's true, then why hasn't the economy ground to a halt yet? Like, so yes, people don't like engaging with reps. Yes, buying is more difficult than it was before, but we still talk to reps and we still buy things. And so I think if I were to your question, Aaron, if I think about like the big challenges that I talk to sales leaders about right now, all driven by changes in client buying behavior, I think one is the one we've been talking about since Challenger, which is customers learning on their own. That has gotten worse, I think, with AI, right? The ability for a customer to quickly query, an AI engine and ask who are the top suppliers in this space and what are features integrations I should be looking for? What are the ones that I shouldn't invest money in? About how much should I pay for a solution like this? Who's a great purchasing consultant that I could enlist their help to really put the screws to the vendor? I want to put together an RFP. Actually, you put together the RFP. What should be in it? Right? Like that has gotten a lot worse. I think the other challenge, which I think there's an AI angle here, but I haven't figured it out, is the growth in buying committees. And this is one that I think like Howard and Dave, I've seen you guys write about, is I think Gartner's latest number is like upwards of 20 stakeholders in a complex purchase. And when we wrote Challenger Customer, it was like 5.5. And now you're seeing high teens, upwards of 20. And I think that's been really accelerated by COVID and the shift to virtual as a channel for selling, where there's no downside to invite everybody to the demo or everybody to hear the pitch from the salesperson. And now you're dealing in many situations with large buying committees and if there's a large enterprise client, those people don't even know each other. They don't know what they do. They're making introductions to their own colleagues before you've even jumped into your pitch. And then I think the third thing we talk about is the rise in no decision losses, which is something we talked about in the Jolt effect. I think that's getting worse too, and I think it's for the reason that Aaron, you're talking about here. As one of the big drivers of indecision, we know is information overload, and this fear that I've not left every stone. I haven't turned over every stone. I haven't done all my research. I'm going to get surprised after the fact. And I think AI makes that a lot worse. And I think if we're to put that buying committee trend together with this no decision trend, imagine a situation where it's not just the person running point on the purchase who's doing all the research. it's the 19 other people on the buying committee who right before the meeting went to ChatGPT and asked, who are the top vendors here? And then they all show up with like ill-informed points of view based on like what AI told them. And then it's just like, at that point, you're like, this is, life's too short. Like that starts to become very onerous for the customer. So to drag out sales cycle leads to no decision losses, a lot of kicking the tire down the road saying, you know what, this is just life's too short and let's just stay with what we do today. It's good enough.
G2 actually just released their buyer behavior report last month, and they show that if like, I think the bigger challenge is getting on the short list. Like, how do I get to be one of three when someone can go to ChatGPT? Like a great prompt to ask is just like, who's the best at whatever you do, and then see who shows up. And everybody's answer will be different, but I probably prompt that every day, just hoping one day my name will show up, and it still hasn't. But they talk about like AI is actually now the number one out of the whole list. It's like AI chatbots, then software review sites, then vendor sites, then you go down like the list. And I just think that's fascinating, right? If I think about back when I was an AE at Challenger and I asked it, what's the best sales methodology? I would hope Challenger came up, but what if I was pushing like a smaller company that didn't have as big of a book? So I think there's all sorts of implications there around how do you even get considered in a world where ChatGPT is almost being the filtering mechanism instead of a human going out and doing their own research.
Yeah, it's really interesting. That's why we're seeing like SEO is now changing to AEO, which is answer optimization, because people are trying to be in those LLMs at the top of Google and whatnot as well. So just for the benefit of everyone in the room, one of the reasons this was put together is that I sent a moany message to these four people in the room, basically moaning about the outreach that I've been getting recently and how ubiquitous and how poor it was and how it's getting worse and worse and worse. And then Matt got an email yesterday from someone saying, hey, I hear you're attending Aaron's I see you're attending webinars. No, I'm one of the bloody panelists on here.
It was worse than that. It was, hey, I noticed you commented on Aaron's post about his upcoming webinar. I'm like, right, because I'm on the effing webinar. And then it was like, and I see that you're focused on driving professional services growth by instilling activator behaviors, and you're focused on this. It's like just ripped literally verbatim from the website and then closed with, we help companies with AI powered outreach to schedule, and I'm like, wait, this is the help that you offer? Oh, thanks.
You're not selling it to me.
So and it was an AI agent that did that.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And this is kind of my point though, right? Is that let's spend a moment talking about outreach, because it's the most prevalent touch point that we have with the market is our ability to, send them emails, drop them calls, or that's becoming even more infrequent now because of it's almost impossible to call people. And the new technology that's come out with Apple with call screening as well is naturally going to have a knock-on effect as well. I guess the question is that do we see a point where we go back to a different type of behavior when it comes to engaging people that's far more human? Because it feels like we're all a bit fatigued with AI from an outreach point of view, and businesses aren't seeing it because they keep doing more and more and more of it. But is there going to be an evolution on how we deploy SDRs, or how we deploy that first contact with a salesperson?
God, I hope so. It's so bad. So when I'm working with my clients, one of the things I'll have them do is I'll have them say, take all your sellers, ask them to pick an account they really want to win. It could be expansion, it could be new logo, and have them name the prospect and title that they want to meet with, write the email. It is honestly often the first time the leader has ever seen the emails going out. So problem number one is like, we have this attitude that prospecting and outbound is down here and it's beneath us. Yet anytime I'm on a CRO community or, an event, everybody talks about generating pipeline is so hard. It's like, well, if you don't inspect it, of course it's going to be hard. But two, I think when you look at how many people are doing the easy button, this is anecdotal, but the data that Lavender came out with a couple of years ago showed that year over year, if you looked at like 2022 versus 2023, if you wrote a personalized email, and personalized is like my least favorite term because it can mean a million different things, but you wrote a truly personalized email, you saw a 100% improvement in reply rate. In 2023, it went up to 1,200%. And of course, like there's no way to know for sure, but anecdotally, I think what a lot of buyers will say is, it is so bad out there. There's such a level of thoughtlessness. Like I just feel like I'm a name on a spreadsheet, a name and a cadence, that when I see someone who actually takes the time to be thoughtful about my business, and instead of writing an email about them, they write an email with an idea, and instead like ask if we're open to having an idea exchange. I don't always say yes, but I at least want to incentivize good behavior. And I feel like I'm screaming that into the ether of like, it has never been easier to do the right thing because AI allows us to do the research that always used to take us so much time. But again, it comes back to this mindset that like outbound is just this thing we need to do. And we hire people that are 22 years old to do it. We don't teach them anything about business acumen. And then we yell at them when they don't hit their targets, which makes them do more of the wrong things. So I think like we are finally in an era where it's possible to do the right thing, but it's not the fault of the SDR in many cases. I think it's actually the fault of the leader who's pushing that like volume game down.
I would say two quick things just to pile on a little bit to what Jen said. But I think one is, I've become one of the things that I think the Activator research was very interesting to look at how these top rainmakers and firms are actually using LinkedIn. And I think generally speaking, we saw kind of LinkedIn for selling purposes fall into kind of three categories. One was amongst the partners that we say like 3,000 partners across these advisory industries. One was the kind of thought leadership approach, which is I'm going to put out a point of view. I'm going to say, hey, we've written this white paper. Here's a long kind of diatribe about whatever or a point of view, and then I sit back and aggressively wait for the phone to ring or wait for my email box to blow up with people who want to talk to me about my perspective here. I think the second one we see a lot of, unfortunately, is I think what we're all exposed to, which is the invite comes with the sales pitch, like it's embedded in the invite. Like we do this kind of service in whatever far-flung country, and I'm like, I don't know what that is. That's not the industry we're in, but thank you very much. Ignore, or you accept, and then the sales pitch comes in like as a fast follow, and it's typically automated. And then the third one, and this is the most successful portion, is what actors are doing. Is there actually, and what Jen said, I think about being thoughtful really resonates with me, which is they're heavy users of LinkedIn, but they're using it, they're treating it as like the world's biggest conference. And what they're doing is not posting points of view. They do post, right? They're certainly not spamming people as soon as they accept their invite or embedding the sales pitch in the invite or the connection request. But they're trying to get in the flow of the dialogue, right? They're following the people they care about. They're trying to engage with them. They're commenting, they're liking, they're sharing. And a lot of what they're trying to do is simply listen and contribute and be helpful and thoughtful with no expectation of getting paid for that, right? So I see Jen talk about something. Hey, Jen, if this would be interesting to you, I know somebody who does this. I can make an introduction. Or have you seen this video? It's exactly on point with what you were just talking about, or the comment you made on that thread. And again, they're just trying to get in that flow of dialogue, which I think is really interesting, and for them is a very successful way to generate business. I think the other thing I would say, and we've seen this before, there's a lot of content out there, of course, but I would argue that most of it's still pretty bad. Most of it is kind of, we always talk about the difference between thought leadership and insight. Thought leadership is confirmatory. It's designed to make you and your company look smart, that you're on the latest issues, et cetera. Insight is different. It's frame breaking. It's provocative. It's designed to get people to do a double take, and then they want to engage about it. And I think what I've seen is that when you produce hard-hitting, provocative, well-researched, in well-written content, people stand up and they want to talk about it. And when you're throwing out generic thought leadership, it's just in one ear, out the other. I mean, LinkedIn has become a wasteland of points of view and white papers and infographics and this, that, and the other thing. And it's all the same, but it's the stuff that's different that gets picked up and generates those conversations. So the best place to be is be in that flow of conversation, delivering value, making connections, and then putting out great content that gets your clients to say, that's really interesting. I'd love to hop on a call with you and talk about that and how you might be able to help us with that.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Challenger's a great example of that. The book, you did that research in 2009. People are still talking about it. It's not the volume game, it's the quality game. It's a perfect example.
Activator's the same thing for us. I mean, we don't do any, it's a little bit inside baseball. We don't do cold outreach as a business. We go out and we share content where people are looking for new ideas, and the people who want to talk about it, they basically come into our sales pipeline.
Spot on. Dr. Dave,
so let me toss a monkey wrench into this because I've been a little bit concerned.
Aaron, mute Dave real quick.
I've been a little bit concerned. I'm in wild agreement with what we're saying, but I also think to some degree we're missing the point. And the group of you have done so much stuff, Challenger, the Jolt effect, Activators just kind of changed my mindset. The research that Howard's doing is just stunning research, and the stuff that Jen's doing and the way she talks about engaging customers is we have to transform our mindsets around these things about how and when we engage our customers. And so a lot of the data is saying, well, customers want us more and more. Yeah, they want us more and more as order takers. They're engaging us in the last, I have these questions before I enter my order. Can you answer these questions? So they're engaging us, and we're missing that opportunity that the activators do, that the challengers do, that the Jolt people do, is how do we get them engaged much earlier? How do we help them think about that? How do we connect with them where they are at, not where we're at? Right now they're connecting us. We're connecting with them where they are at because they're about to put an order in, and all they have is, do you have these features, functions, and can you give me a discount if I order by the end of the month? And we answer those questions. But the thing about activators is and Matt and I are having these quiet debates behind the scenes, is what I think is more important about Activator. It's a mindset. It's the way we operate every single day. It's the way we think about engaging our customers and coming to them with ideas, helping them connect dots and helping that. And Matt and I are talking about one of the big fears I have about Activator, and a lot of it about this stuff, is we as salespeople tend to think about beginnings and ends. The beginning is prospect, the end is close and walk away and do something else. I don't think activators think in terms of beginnings and ends. It's a mindset about how they engage and how they constantly create value for their customers. And in that process of that mindset, we engage customers really differently. We have customers coming to us, talking to us very differently and saying, how can you help? Prospecting is less about, I mean, most of the time the calls I get is, Dave, we've been thinking about this. Where do we fall shit on it?
Well, I think, Dave, I think you taught me this phrase a long time ago, but in sales, you get delegated down to the person you sound like. And if you sound like an order taker, then that's where you get delegated down to. But if you come across as somebody who delivers insight and value, as you and Jen said, like that's a different kind of approach. So the last thing I'll say here on this activator piece is that the most predictive variable in our entire study was how partners responded to the following statement: my clients think of me even when we're not engaged in paid work. So think about that for a moment. That's the kind of perspective where it's like, I'm not working with Dave or Jen right now, but I respect and I value their perspective so much that I'm going to reach out to them. I'm going to shoot them a text and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or can we hop on a quick call? And because I know that they're going to be helpful, I know they're delivering value. And then paid work is just a natural evolution of that value-based relationship we built.
So I'm struggling with this idea. I'm going to interrupt you.
One second.
We're under control.
Dave, one second. I just want to play the voice of the people in the room here, right? Is that everything that all of you are saying is absolutely spot on. I couldn't agree more. In fact, my head almost rolled off my shoulders. I was nodding so much. But let me be the voice of the seller for a moment. I've got this target sitting on my back. I've got no support or coaching from my boss. And Matt Dixon's telling me I've now got to go and scour on LinkedIn, offering insight and being helpful and not.
Yes, for free. You got to do it for free too.
Free, right? So here's the question: is it fair? Is it fair that businesses are still asking the traditional way of selling through outbound, while all the research points to the role of the seller has completely evolved, but more importantly, it's evolved in the buyer's eyes, not from how we look at it as a business. As a buyer, it's evolved.
Here's how I would push back at that mentality, and Howard has much more to say about this than I do. We've for years been kind of talking about business focused selling. How do you go talk to customers about their business? How do you talk to them about their problems, and not even talk about your product, even if they ask you about it? And so we've talked about it, how to develop customer acumen, how do you develop problem acumen, how do you do those things? And people say, well, gee, that's awfully complex. I have to start understanding my customer. Oh, gee, my God, understand our customers. That's groundbreaking. And Howard's research, we're looking at time to customer acumen. Time to customer acumen is remarkably short. You might share some of the stuff that you've seen on that. So how do I change that? In our work with our clients, we find, it's kind of counterintuitive. When we do this business focus stuff, is we said when rates double, since I started working with Matt and Ted around no decision made, we were starting to track no decision made. No decision made goes down by 20%. Buying cycles reduced by 30-40%.
Mm.
So, I mean, you have to be brain dead to say this is a huge performance impact. And so people start saying, well, it takes a long time to develop that. Howard, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I'm interested in your perspective.
Well, there's a lot of things that are on my mind based off everything that's gone around. The first one is that notice Matt Dixon doesn't say that he texts me when he wants to figure out something and get my opinion.
You never gave me your number, Howard. That's
Matt, I know where I stand. I know where I stand. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that are going on right now, and so I'll answer Dave's question, but I want to throw a couple of data points again. Number one, we're sitting in an environment in which a vast majority of salespeople are trained, and leaders and enablement, and everybody, including us, have had a decade and a half of zero interest rate environments in the United States to sell into, which was relatively easy and was all about scale.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think about that, the leaders we have, the trainers we have, the thinking we have was based off a decade and a half of relatively easy money. If you don't like swallow that reality to say one of the reasons that things have drastically changed is the CFO can make more than 0% interest with the money they're not spending. That is huge, everybody. And we as a collective field are grappling with the reality that we don't understand that environment because we have not lived in it. We didn't grow up in it. We weren't trained in it. So let's talk about another data point. After 20, so we had the roll up out of COVID. I looked at data about a year ago. It hasn't changed till this year. And we laid off about 2.5 million salespeople in the United States. This was a 35% reduction in the role of the sales development rep, a 10% reduction in the overall headcount or the sales headcount. This is backed up by LinkedIn data and Department of Labor data. And so we're not investing in the top of funnel like we used to, but we are still deploying AI to do the work because it's cost less except for brand. Now, here's where the trick comes, because Dave and I were talking about this a couple of years ago, and Jen helped us use Lavender, and it was great. And we were starting to get results that were phenomenal. We're talking about getting as high as 70% response rates off of our outbound.
Yeah.
We're still averaging 20% off outbound on average in the classes. Here's the rub, though. When we were doing that for pipeline development, we were actually reducing the bottom of funnel because we were actually getting, Matt Dixon, you point out, right? You get to delegate it down to the way you speak. Well, guess what? If you actually speak pretty good, it's worse because you actually have to show up. You used AI to get the meeting, and now you show up.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know what's going down. And so business acumen and curiosity are the currency of the future with agility. And we've got a bunch of people that think they know how to do the job. So Dave and I have been working on how do we accelerate, how do we create, first curiosity, second business acumen. How expensive is it? Because it doesn't matter what methodology we teach younger people, older people who perform great, They already have the business acumen because of years and years of talking to customers. But what about the new people who are starting? And this is where, Aaron, you say we just kind of leave them alone. We give them basic training. We give them some stuff to do. They actually don't even know. If you want to test this, go ask people the following 3 or 4 questions, and I think you'll be baffled. What is the difference between a publicly traded and private company? What is a 10K? What is an annual report?
10K is 6.2 miles. We all know that.
Oh my God. I thought Dave was the dad jokes.
That one before that was quick. He's done that one.
I'm here for the next 10 minutes.
Yeah. So, and then the other one is, what's an IPO? What's the history? What's the life of a firm? What's the role? You can ask them, what does this role do? And if you've been in the field and you've been selling into the same vertical for years, you can answer some of these questions. But if you're new to the field, then you don't know these questions. And the challenge is that I can give you all the methodology training possible, and you will use your talk track or your playbook, and you listen to that customer respond, and you sit there over on the other side and go, I don't know what they just said. So I'm going to go to the next question that I have prepared because I don't know what to do. And that was a buying signal. That was a deep moment. And this is the moment where Matt was talking about that I'm an executive, I'm a decision maker, and I just gave you gold and you looked at me and moved to the next question. I'm ending this thing so fast and I'm never going to talk to you again. And the sad part is it isn't that poor salesperson's fault. They don't have the guts. They don't have the curiosity developed. They don't have the basic acumen. And so we're finding that if we just don't go to discovery, we don't go to prospecting right off the bat, we actually go to the goal of developing acumen by talking to key leaders in the vertical we're going after 2 to 3 interviews of deep discovery, no product.
Yeah.
Using the Brock questionnaire, we begin to see an uptick in the ability in measurable curiosity and measurable business acumen. By the time we get to the 7th to 8th interview, it's pervasive. Yeah. We've actually altered the behavior of the person to where they're starting to ask reasonable questions that are in depth. They're showing curiosity, they're showing acumen because they know they're not trying to sell anything, they're trying to understand business first.
Brilliant insight. Absolutely brilliant insight. In fact, the first ever job I had in sales, the onboarding was spending a week with each department outside of sales because it helped me understand how a business operates. And then when they put us on the phone, they said, you're not allowed to sell. You can just ask questions. If we catch you selling, you don't pass. It's like, that's it. It's curiosity and business acumen summed up.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting. I made millions of dollars off of Challenger. Because
I'm glad somebody did.
people would go through their Challenger training and all this sort of thing, and salespeople would go in with these great insights, and the customer would say, "That's interesting. Tell me more."
Mm-hmm.
And they couldn't answer that question.
Yeah.
By the way,
that's this business acumen. It's how do I drill down more deeply into these issues with the customer?
I don't think actually sales leaders even really want people doing that. I genuinely feel that because if they did, they wouldn't be buying intent-led technology. The second someone comes on your website, now we can follow. Like if you look at the actual narrative that sellers are hearing inside their organizations, it's speed to lead, it's intent. And that's all order taker thing. That is us pushing sellers to the far right side to say, go spend all of your time with people who've already decided they want something. Like I genuinely would be curious to see how many sales leaders even want their sellers doing the type of stuff, Matt, that's in Activator. I don't think a lot of sellers or a lot of leaders actually want it. And therefore they don't train them to do those things because they don't perceive them to be either possible, attainable, or important. And that is why, like, I keep coming back to the utmost layer of the sales organization, because sellers are going to do what you tell them to do for the most part, if it's easy. And it's so much easier to chase an intent lead than it is to go out and have an intelligent conversation, Dave, like you're talking about. So that's what I'm going to do as a salesperson. And I'm going to get applauded for it.
Yeah. John's thinking about laughing because Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go
I was thinking about
ahead.
Jen's post about the Thigh Master, which Jen, I'll let you you can regale everyone with. Everyone remembers the Thigh Master, right? Turns out it didn't give you great thighs, so it was just like a total piece of crap. But it's interesting because I think about like insight and like you're saying, Jen, like this activator stuff. I think, and it goes back to what you guys were talking about before. Is it's hard, and because it's hard, nobody wants to do it. So it's like Challenger's a perfect example of the number of companies I've talked to over the years who said we implemented Challenger, and I say, awesome, can I see your commercial insight? And they're like, the what? And I was like, oh, so you basically just told them to go out and challenge customer thinking, but you didn't give them anything to challenge with. So they're actually annoying. They're not challenging. Those are two totally different things. And you look at activating, which activator is a commitment to flow value through a purposefully built professional network. Building that network, developing that commitment, and figuring out what are the sources of value to deliver is hard. Building commercial insight is hard. And so if there's an easy button, which is like, or we could hire this machine that just like spams the world and 5% of people say yes, and that's good enough. And then we'll just go sell them our stuff. Like I'm going to take the easy route all day long, but it's like, there is no easy button for six pack abs, and there is no easy button for like, great thighs, and there is no easy button to insight and value. Like it takes work.
Hard work works because it's hard.
It's
So here's where this whole discussion gets me so pissed off because I'm
just the parts Jen said, not the parts I said.
I'm just so greedy. I think of the missed opportunity.
Yeah.
And we're designing everything so that we become order takers. And all that can and should be replaced by AI. And this is not news. I'm an old timer. I remember this whole thing called EDI, electronic data interchange. And that was one of the first kind of automations in this. And that started coming out in the early 90s and all. And we've seen things progress. We've seen things like DocuSign make contracting and all that much easier and so on. So we're just seeing the continuation in that path of pushing us to order taking, and order taking can and should be fully automated. But then I start looking at, and it's again the research that Matt and your team, CEB, DCM, and all that have done is I'm just so goddamn greedy. I said, look at all this opportunity we're missing. Mm-hmm. Look at 70% no decision made. Look at all these people that start and never go. Look at these people that don't even recognize that there's an opportunity to do things better. If we could start engaging them and thinking differently, and again, part of what I'm learning from Activator is it's, you come with ideas and start saying, have you ever thought of this? And, think of this. And all of a sudden you start percolating with that. And there are billions and billions and billions of dollars of lost opportunity. And as an old-time sales executive, I just get so goddamn pissed off and say, I got to win that stuff.
Mm-hmm. As Dave once told me, I love the story he told me once that he was talking to a client and said that after several days, he said, basically, you're grossly underperforming your potential. And to Jen's point, I think you're just reinforcing the fact that we're dealing with leaders that for a decade and a half have lived under a zero interest rate environment. So they're doing what they know how to do. The students that come out of our program, it is not uncommon for them to be multiplying the impact. So the performance differential between one of our students and a student from another program or just regular hires, it is not uncommon for it to be a 3x, 2x. My favorite post of this year, Dave, and I pinged you on it because this was one of the students that got a treatment. They got the new business acumen treatment. And for everybody, I'm going to tell you, I'm not trying to disparage this young lady. She's amazing. She worked her way through school. She did not hit her quota in her boot camp, and she was marginal in her business acumen class. So she was not like the top of her game, right? So she put out a post in April that said, I just finished my first quarter with live quota, and for January, I was 1,000% of my quota. In February, I was 2,000% of my quota. In March, I was 345% of my quota. And I was like, oh, That's the wrong way. You should have, but fascinating, right? We're talking. And so I pinged her boss and I said, hey, how's the other kid doing? Because there were two kids that were in the program. He said, he's right behind her in exponential performance. I said, how is that measuring against the rest of the team? He said, not even close. So the companies' leaders are grossly underperforming their potential because they think they know how to play the game because they played the game in a zero interest rate environment. And the gains to be had are phenomenal. The ability to recruit people who know this is consistent. I'm a renewable source of people who know exactly how to play the game, that know Matt's work, that know Jen's work, that know Dave's work. We're a renewable source. Every 6 months, we have a new crop that comes out that is a modern seller and is an exponential performer. So it's not impossible to train people to accomplish these things, but it does take leadership and it takes designing something that isn't about scale, it's about effectiveness and then efficiency.
So
And
just
it's
before
what it
Matt's
is.
got to
It's
go now,
what
so
Jen
everyone say
is.
bye-bye to
It's
Matt.
what Jen is
Everyone say
so
bye-bye to
good
Matt.
about is shifting the
Matt's
conversation.
gonna leave, huh?
Matt's got to leave. Bye, Matt. Matt's going to.
It's something you guys said. I'm not sure. I'll think about what it was. Hey, I do apologize. As I told these guys, I do have another thing I got to get on for, and because as you can all tell from this discussion, I'm not a technical expert. It might take me some figuring out because I got to switch platforms and all that stuff. So
Thank you, Matt.
anyway,
Great,
thank you,
Matt.
Aaron, for hosting and for having me.
No worries. So we've got 4 minutes left. So I just want to ask one last question because I think it's probably going to be the most important question. I'm really, really interested, and these sort of takeaways can always be a little bit awkward and a bit kind of like yeah, whatever. But if there was one thing, one piece of advice that you could give to a sales manager and a sales rep to make sure that they're achieving the type of type of achievement that Dr. Dave is talking about, or what you're seeing in your practice, Jen, or Dave, what you're seeing in your practice as well. What would that be? If you give them one piece of advice, a sales manager and a sales rep, what would it be?
I have so
Jen,
many. I'll
Speak
start
right
with
now.
one. I don't think you can fix something if you don't understand that it's broken. So my first step is to say, ask your team to do the exercise I mentioned earlier. Ask them to pick a target account, ask them to write an email, and then look at what you see and answer honestly, would I respond to this? Or does this sound like every other email that I get in my inbox? Like just do that one current state assessment. It costs you nothing. And then you can understand like what am I actually trying to solve for? Because I think we tend to run, as we've talked about today, to volume and frequency and let me try a new channel and let me try a new tool, when in reality oftentimes it's just the message itself is totally not compelling and doesn't matter what channel you put it in. You got to fix that first, otherwise we're just spraying more noise out into the ether. So I would say like just assess what's actually happening at the front line today.
Brilliant. Really good.
I'm going to go with don't be afraid to disrupt whatever you're seeing, whatever your status quo is. So if I'm an individual producer, don't be afraid to break out and realize exactly what we just said, right? 10, 15 years of zero interest rate environment and people who think they know what they know, they don't know. They don't know what to do in the current environment. So we need to be in a state of disrupting what is going on currently. And then moving up to the manager, I would say give people room to disrupt. You've got to have disruptors. So I sometimes I use hashtag sales disruptors for my program because when I talk to somebody, I said you need to be prepared that if my students come into your shop, they're going to disrupt whatever you think is working, and you need to give them room to not just do it, but to infect the org. So if you're a leader, so let's move up to a leader. You need to be open to the fact that what you're currently doing isn't working and allow for sprints and tests and allow people to disrupt what the model is. Because if it's not working, then you should be experimenting. Grab people who will disrupt. And I tell almost every partner, listen, put our kids into the AI space. They're okay with failure because we let them fail, but let them be part of the future. So you got to allow that to happen if you're a leader, If you're a manager, you got to run cover to allow those people to disrupt. If you're an individual, disrupt. If you're not supported, go find a better place.
Good advice. Dave, I'll leave the final word to you.
I'd pile on kind of what both Jen and Howard said. I'd say get curious. And start formally training your people in curiosity. We run curiosity workshops with all sorts of people, so get curious. The second thing is really from a manager point of view is stop doubling down on what doesn't work. Start figuring out what does work, and curiosity will get you to those things.
Fantastic.
Don't double down on stupid.
Well, guys, firstly, thank you for everyone who logged in for this. We really appreciate you coming along and the support. Jen, Dave, Dr. Dover, once again, learned so much, as I always do when I meet you guys and spend time with you. Thank you for being a part of this, and we'll see you all really, really soon.